everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new here. I'm Andrea M, and this is an extremely important update for Real Crime Down Under regarding the Frankston monster serial killer Paul Denyer. And as there are almost 2,000 of you who have watched that video and have contacted me about this case and given me your opinions on it, which I take on board and I find extremely valuable, you're going to want to know what's going on with this guy. So I did post a small update on one of my other videos about him regarding his parole. So what many of you know, some of you may not, is he did apply for parole this year as his 30-year non-parole period was up. So he applied for parole. It came up with the parole board in April and he was denied. So what this now means is he can reapply again for parole unless his file is marked never to be released. And I cannot understand, as many of you who have watched the video and know of his crimes will also be a bit flabbergasted about, is the brutality of his crimes, all the crimes that he committed, not just the murders. Why he was not marked never to be released in the first place is beyond me. So I think at the beginning he was marked to be serving life in prison on 3 life sentences, but he appealed that decision and they did mark him to be eligible for parole in 30 years, which the 30 years is this year. So what we know so far is he has been denied parole for this year. The problem being that there is about to be changes to the parole laws in Victoria. Now, it sounds all good at first. It's if you have applied for parole and you're an extremely violent criminal, such as Denyer, you may not then again apply for parole until a 5-year period is up and you need to meet a number of specifications to be able to apply again. What the problem is with this, because he's not marked to never be released, is he can reapply again, which brings it all back up for the victims and the victims that survived his attacks and his stalking before he became a serial killer, to the families and the loved ones who are left over from his crime spree. And this includes Natalie Russell's boyfriend, David Limbrick, who is now an MP in Victoria. And he actually received a letter from Paul Denyer begging to be released when he was applying for his parole. So what this means is he has asked the loved one of somebody that he brutally murdered back in the 90s to help him get paroled so he could be released. So that there will tell you the mentality of this guy. Now, Paul Denyer should not be able to be allowed to write letters to the victims' families. However, there was a loophole and he saw it and he went right through it because David Limbrick is an MP. Prisoners are allowed to pen letters to MPs. Go figure. In an interview with 2AW Melbourne, David did say that he had no doubt in his mind that Denyer would reoffend again if he was released, and that he was just biding his time and waiting to be let out. So, unless, as one of my subscribers said, you want this guy potentially living next door to you, it's up to the public to try and help affect change so that violent offenders such as Paul Denyer, who everybody has no doubt about will reoffend again, and that more people will be in danger and potentially will be made unalive, that he can never be released. So as I was researching for this update, because there was a lot of information coming in, I came across a story for a current affair that I read, and I won't go into it all here because there was, oh my God, there was tons of it. So what basically has been happening with Paul Denyer is he was allowed to have pen pals while in prison. And he started writing to this woman. And she was kind of finding him appealing at first because of the stunt he pulled, trying to say that he was actually identifying as a woman named Paula, that he was actually transgender, and that he was discovering his womanly self, and that made him not dangerous to anybody anymore. And in the letters that he penned to this lady, he described how he wanted to have lots of cats when he got out of prison and how much he loves animals. And anybody will know if you've researched him or you've watched other videos on him or the video that I produced. Cats were one of his favourite animals to practice cruelty on. I'm not going to go into what he did to one of his neighbour's cats and her kittens because it's absolutely horrendous. This is a man who should not be allowed to ever have another pet, to not be in cooey of an animal, a human being, anything for the rest of his life. And the lady actually went to see Daniel while in the prison, and when she went in to see him, he was dressed as Paula. He had lipstick on, he had the piggy tails, all the things. And she found him quite intimidating. She said he's a very big man, he's got big hands, and he looks extremely strong. So it's very easy for Daniel to overpower somebody who's smaller than himself. And she said she was about to leave, and he grabbed her and planted a kiss on her forehead. And she said it was just absolutely chilling. So she has actually her identity has been kept secret to protect her, but she did send the letters and her thoughts to a current affair, and she was of the opinion that he's a very scary person and that he will reoffend again. So another person who also spoke to a current affair was one of Paul Daniel's former prison guards, and he has had a lot to do with Paul ever since he's been in the prison there for the last 30 years, and he said he found him a very scary and chilling prisoner to be taken care of and interacting with on a daily basis. And he said also he's got no doubt in his mind that Paul will reoffend again if he is released. So that's why it kind of beggars belief a little bit, and I know a lot of you have had the same feelings. I've actually also been contacted by people who knew Paul and were around in that area where he used to live, and they used to see him going about his daily business. And they were frightened of him then. They knew there was something not quite right. So, as I keep going back to, like my subscriber said, he could move in next door to any one of us. He has also said, oh, if you let me out, I'm not going to go back to the Frankston area. I'm not going to be there. Okay. So, if he's not going to Frankston when he gets out, where is he going to go? Like, obviously, if he's released, the parole board do need to keep an eye on him. But what happens when that period's over? He could go anywhere. And, I mean, he might have to, constantly be checking in, but that's not going to stop him travelling around at night, or, these guys will find any way to exact the activities that they want to commit, because that's the way they're wired. They don't change. There is nothing you can do for these people. Such violent offenders and serial killers cannot be rehabilitated. We've seen it time and time again. So what everybody is worried about, and you have to remember there were a lot of people that Paul Daniel, their lives have been ruined forever by him. And that includes Debbie Freeman's son. He was only 12 days old when his mother was murdered by Paul Daniel. So he's been robbed of his mother. And he is another one of the voices speaking out loudly to make sure he's never released from prison. But there needs to be more of us. So I'm going to link the petitionforchange.org that has been going around for a number of years, but is really gaining momentum again. Because what the problem is with this non-parole period of 5 years that you cannot reapply for, Daniel Andrews has said that you need to go and do an intensive kind of a rehabilitation so that you can prove you're never going to reoffend again. But for somebody like Daniel, who is so desperate to get out that he's penning letters to people begging for his freedom, he's going to do whatever it takes to get out. And then when he's out, he's going to reoffend again. There's no doubt about it. And what happens also is when these guys are constantly coming up for parole, there's just this dread in the community. There's this dread in the families of the victims that this guy's going to get out and he's going to do it again. So this is why he needs to be relieved of his ability to apply for parole every 5 years. Because he'll be doing whatever he can, to say the right things and play lip service to the parole board and the government at large. And, what happens if he gets a few sympathetic ears? He will be released and things will all start up again. Paul Daniel is still relatively young. He's only 51 years of age. And, you know, we all know John Wayne Gacy was in his 50s and still committing the crimes that he was committing back in the 70s and the early 80s. So with these guys, age doesn't really mean very much. So I'm going to just read the article that I found from a current affair detailing the law and everything that they're trying to get passed. So I'm just going to read that out to you guys because I don't want to miss anything or get anything wrong. And then I'm going to play just a snippet from 7 News about Paul Daniel. So I'm just going to read this to you guys so I can update you, and then we'll have a look at the news clip. So the article goes, serial killers such as Paul Daniel will soon be unable to reapply for parole for an extended period under sweeping changes to Victoria's parole system. Premier Daniel Andrews said work would begin to introduce minimum periods of time between parole applications, along with introducing rules to ensure prisoners take up meaningful rehabilitation programs, whatever that means. He has not gone into any detail whatsoever of what that would mean. It comes after Daniel penned a letter to the former boyfriend of one of the victims begging to be released, and as we know, that was David Limbrick, the boyfriend of Natalie Russell. In 1993, as we all know, Daniel, who is now 51, as I mentioned before, was sentenced to 3 life sentences after pleading guilty to the murders of Natalie Russell, Elizabeth Stevens, 18, and 22-year-old mother Deborah Freen. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and as I mentioned before, this was later appealed and reduced to a non-parole period of 30 years, meaning he was eligible for release back in April. And that bid, fortunately, has been rejected for now. Andrews said the reforms would ensure those who were granted parole had completed meaningful change, still not elaborating on what that meaningful change would be. But we all know he's going to do whatever it takes to get out. So he'll exact that meaningful change and then go right back to what he was doing in the 90s. Daniel Andrews went on to say about the prisoners, if you are unwilling to be involved in those rehabilitation programs, you might get one crack at parole and that's it. You don't get any more, he said. He also said, I'm not talking about you might attend a counselling session or two. Right. It also goes on to say it needs to be a proper, genuine effort to change because that change is directly relevant to your ongoing risk to the safety of the Victorian community. But I would just like to add that is the Australian community at large. He doesn't have to stay in Victoria forever. This is the thing. This is not about making changes for one person, Daniel Andrews said. It's about making changes that are enduring and will be relevant to a larger group of people. The changes would be specifically targeted to those found guilty of murder or multiple murders, along with serious offending. There has been no timeline revealed about when the changes could come into effect. And that's where the article ends. So as I was talking about before, if you would like to help the families of Paul Daniel's victims and the victims that he actually stalked and are fortunately still with us, and secure the safety of the community at large, not just Victoria, but for all of us, please head to the website change.org and sign the petition to prevent the Frankston monster serial killer Paul Daniel from ever being released. The link will be in the description box below, and I urge you to share it with everybody that you know so that he cannot be released. And now I'm just going to play a little bit of the clip from 7 News in which David Limbrick gives his response to the changes in the laws and Paul Daniel at large.
Begged for freedom.
Pretty shocked and disgusted, really. It was all about him, and I
didn't buy any of it.
The 3-page plea was sent to David Limbrick's electorate office. He was Natalie Russell's boyfriend when she was murdered by Denya in 1993. The killer, who murdered Elizabeth Anne Marie Stevens and Debbie Freem, wrote, "I am not a danger to society. I will never go back to the Frankston, Langwarrin area."
The very fact that he would write to me and think that he could convince me shows just how out of touch with reality he really is.
Absolutely no remorse, no understanding of the damage that's been left behind or what he took from us.
This week, Parliament will debate a new law to stop Denya applying for parole.
It is almost the most important thing in my life aside from my family at the moment. Yep, he just needs to stay there.
The Premier has dismissed the bill, saying the parole board will keep Denya behind bars.
Why won't Daniel Andrews listen to those families and instead, pig-headedly, ignore this only because it's a Liberal bill?
Ms Russell's friends and family have made repeated requests to speak with Premier Daniel Andrews, but that meeting has never eventuated. Last week, however, they did meet with Attorney General Jacqueline Symes. They're now calling on her to support the bill or find another way to keep Denya behind bars for life.
I think it's really important to the people of Victoria to have some sort of reassurance that he's never going to harm another woman.
So please, and I know there are a lot of you who are very passionate about this particular monster, write letters to Parliament, write letters to the Parole Board, write letters to Daniel Andrews, just write letters in general, sign the petition, share, donate. If you can't donate to the petition and get it out there more, just please share it a lot because that helps as well. I said before, for me, and for many of you as well, you've told me, there's no doubt in our minds, the minds of the victim's family and other people mentioned in this video, that if released, Paul Denya will re-offend again and more people have the potential to die at his hands. Also, we want to move to change this to stop the re-traumatisation of surviving victims and their families and to help make sure that this monster is never released. As more details come to hand concerning this matter, I will be continuing to update everybody on it, as a lot of you have responded to that particular video. And a lot of you have contacted me about it, and I really appreciate that you have done that. It just helps me when I'm presenting these videos to show that the human face of these tragedies. And it doesn't just extend to these people that have to go on without their girlfriend, without their mother, without their sister, without their niece, whatever, that it extends to all of us, that it touches everybody in Australia, in the community, in Victoria. It touches us all when these tragedies happen, that these, I can't call him a man, I can't call him a human, he's a monster, that these monsters commit. So if you are interested in helping to change the law and get this man locked up for the rest of his natural life, right where he belongs, please go to the website. There will be links below. And that's it for this update. As more come to hand, I will let you guys know. As always, thanks so much again for watching. And if you are interested in this channel, please consider subscribing. It would help me out a lot, and it would help me continue to help try and effect change in these matters and to bring awareness to what goes on after these guys are locked up and what happens with parole and stuff. So thanks guys again. Please do go and sign the petition, and I will see you all again in my next video. Bye.